My name is Catherine, and I am 28 years old. I was so excited to reconnect with my family after 5 years of minimal contact. My marketing career had finally taken off, and I wanted to share my success with them. But 3 days after our heartfelt reunion, I discovered my bank account had been completely drained. When I called my father in panic, his response chilled me to the bone. He simply shrugged and said, "We needed it." If you are watching this and know what it is like to have family betray your trust, let me know in the comments and hit subscribe. This story might help you see what is possible when you stand up for yourself. Growing up in our small Pennsylvania town was never easy. Our household constantly teetered on the edge of financial collapse. My father Harold, now 55, had an endless string of money problems that seemed to follow him like a shadow. He was always the one at family gatherings passing around IOUs instead of Christmas gifts, borrowing from relatives with promises of repayment that rarely materialized. My mother Elizabeth worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She was a nurse by day and waitressed on weekends, often coming home with dark circles under her eyes, but still managing to help me with homework. She was the glue that held our family together, always making sure Timothy and I never felt the full weight of our financial struggles. When I was 19, tragedy struck. My mother was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer, despite never having smoked a day in her life. Within 6 months, she was gone, leaving a void that could never be filled. Her death was the first earthquake in my life, but the aftershocks would continue for years to come. After her funeral, I discovered that the modest life insurance policy she had maintained was mysteriously gone. Dad claimed the benefits had been used for her medical bills, but something in his explanation never quite added up. I was too grief-stricken to investigate further. With Mom gone, I was suddenly on my own. Dad seemed to collapse inward, spending more time at local bars than at home. Timothy, only 13 at the time, became increasingly withdrawn. I knew I needed to forge my own path, so I applied for every scholarship I could find and worked multiple jobs to put myself through state college. Those years were grueling. I would study during the day, work evening shifts at a call center, and then wait tables on weekends. Sometimes, I would go days surviving on ramen noodles and coffee. Meanwhile, Harold would occasionally call, not to check on my well-being, but to ask if I could loan him money for bills or to help with Timothy. Against my better judgment, I sent what little I could spare, often skipping meals to help them. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Chicago. I threw myself into my work, slowly building a reputation for creativity and dedication. Each promotion felt like a victory over my difficult past. By 28, I had become a marketing executive with a comfortable salary, a modern apartment, in a good neighborhood, and most importantly, financial stability. My relationship with my family had become increasingly distant over the years. Phone calls with my father dwindled to brief, awkward exchanges on holidays. Timothy and I occasionally texted, but he seemed to have adopted our father's perspective that I had somehow abandoned them by moving to Chicago to pursue my career. When the invitation to the family reunion arrived in my email, my first instinct was to decline. It came from my Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister, who had always been kind to me, but remained close to my father, despite knowing his flaws. The reunion would be held at the old family property where my grandparents had once lived, now owned by my Uncle Frank. "I do not think I can make it," I told my best friend Lauren over coffee one Saturday morning. "Every time I interact with my dad, I end up feeling guilty and manipulated." Lauren looked at me thoughtfully. "Catherine, maybe it is time to try again. You have established yourself now. You are stronger. Plus, do not. You want to see how Timothy has grown up. He must be in college by now." She had a point. Timothy would be 22, and I had missed so much of his life. Despite our strained relationship, he was still my little brother. I also missed my extended family, the cousins I had grown up with, the aunts and uncles who had been present throughout my childhood. "Just be careful," Lauren added, knowing my history all too well. "Do not share too many details about your finances. You know how your dad can be." I nodded, remembering the time in college when I had mentioned receiving a small academic award with a cash prize. Within days, my father had called with a desperate story about the electricity being shut off. I had sent him the entire amount, only to later learn from Timothy that the utilities had been fine, but Dad had bought a used motorcycle that he ended up selling a month later. Despite these memories, I decided to attend the reunion. I took time off work, purchased thoughtful gifts for everyone, and even bought a new outfit for the occasion. The drive from Chicago to rural Pennsylvania gave me time to mentally prepare. I rehearsed setting boundaries and reminded myself that I was no longer the vulnerable teenager, desperate for family approval. As I crossed the state line, I felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. Part of me yearned for reconciliation, for the warm embrace of family connections. Another part remained vigilant, protective of the life and security I had worked so hard to build. Little did I know that this reunion would test those boundaries in ways I could never have imagined. The family property looked smaller than I remembered. The white farmhouse, with its wraparound porch and faded blue shutters, sat on 5 acres of land, dotted with oak trees. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I spotted several familiar cars, and a few I did not recognize. My heart raced as I stepped out of my car. Before I could grab my bags, the front door burst open and Aunt Barbara came rushing out. "Catherine, oh my goodness, look at you," she exclaimed, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of the same perfume she had worn my entire life. So professional and grown up. Elizabeth would be so proud. The mention of my mother sent a familiar pang through my chest, but I smiled through it. "It is good to see you, Aunt Barbara. Thanks for organizing all this." "Well, come on in. Everyone is so excited to see you." Inside, the house buzzed with activity. Uncle Frank was manning a grill on the back patio. Cousins I had not seen in years were scattered throughout the house, some with spouses and children I had never met. I made my rounds, exchanging hugs and catching up on their lives. "Look who finally decided we were good enough for her," came a gruff voice from behind me. I turned to see my father, Harold, leaning against the doorframe. He looked older than his 55 years, his face weathered and his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. Despite my resolve, my stomach tightened at the sight of him. "Hi, Dad," I said, stepping forward to give him an awkward hug. He patted my back stiffly. "Nice car," he commented, nodding toward the window. "Must be doing well for yourself in the big city." Before I could respond, Timothy appeared beside him. My little brother was no longer little. He stood nearly 6 feet tall, with our mother's gentle eyes contrasting sharply with a hardened expression that reminded me too much of our father. "Hey, Cat," he said, using my childhood nickname that no one had called me in years. "Timothy," I smiled, genuinely happy to see him. "You look great. How is college going?" A strange look passed between my father and brother. "It is going," Timothy replied vaguely. "When I can afford the tuition." "Your brother is studying computer science," Harold interjected proudly. "Smart as a whip. Gets that from me." I bit back a retort about who had actually helped Timothy with his homework all those years. Instead, I asked, "Which university?" "State," Timothy replied. "Same as you went to." "That is great," I said, wondering if he had received any scholarships like I had. "We will have to compare notes later." The conversation shifted as Aunt Barbara announced that dinner was ready. We all filed onto the back patio where tables had been set up under strings of lights. I found myself seated between my cousin Brittany and Uncle Frank's new wife Denise. Brittany leaned over during the meal. "So tell me about Chicago. You are like what, a marketing director now?" "Executive," I corrected, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "I just got promoted last month." "That is amazing," Brittany said. "You always were the ambitious one. I bet they pay you the big bucks now, huh?" I noticed my father's head turn slightly in our direction. "It is comfortable," I said vaguely, remembering Lauren's warning. "Oh, come on," Harold called from across the table. "No need to be modest. Tell us what you are making these days." The table fell awkwardly silent. "Dad, That is not really appropriate dinner conversation, I said lightly, trying to deflect. What we are, family, he insisted. Besides, I was just telling everyone how proud I am of my successful daughter. To change the subject, I asked Timothy about his classes, and was relieved when he began talking about a programming project. The conversation gradually returned to normal, but I could feel my father's eyes on me throughout the meal. After dinner, as everyone was helping clean up, Harold cornered me in the kitchen. "So I heard you got a big bonus with that promotion," he said, casually rinsing a plate. I froze. "Where did you hear that?" He shrugged. "You mentioned it to your Aunt Barbara on the phone last week." I had in fact mentioned it briefly, when she called to confirm my attendance at the reunion. I had not expected her to share that information with my father. "Timothy's tuition is due next month," he continued, his voice lowering. "We are a little short, just a temporary thing." The familiar feeling of obligation mixed with resentment rose in my chest. "How much are you short?" "About 3,000, he said. "I would not ask, but you know family helps family." "Let me think about it," I replied noncommittally. "I have some big expenses coming up myself." He nodded, but his expression darkened slightly. Sure, no rush. We have the whole weekend to catch up." Later that evening, as most of the family dispersed to their sleeping arrangements, I found myself sitting on the porch swing with Brittany. The night was warm, crickets chirping in the darkness beyond the porch light. "It is good to see you, Catherine," she said. "It has been way too long." "I know," I admitted. "Work keeps me busy, but that is no excuse." She was quiet for a moment. "How are things with your dad and Timothy?" "Really, I mean." "Complicated," I said after a pause. "We do not talk much." Brittany nodded. "Uncle Harold has been having a rough time. Aunt Barbara has been helping them out a lot." "Oh," I tried to sound casual. "What kind of rough time?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I probably should not say anything. Just, you know, the usual money stuff. I think he got into some gambling for a while there." She paused. "Just be careful, okay? I love Uncle Harold, but..." "But what?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just family dynamics, you know. They can be tricky." I could tell she was holding something back, but before I could press further, Harold stepped onto the porch. "Beautiful night," he said, as if he had not been eavesdropping. "Brittany, your mom is looking for you." After Brittany left, my father sat down beside me on the swing. "It is good to have you home, Catherine. I have missed you." For a moment, I allowed myself to believe him. We sat in silence watching lightning bugs flicker in the yard. He put his arm around me, and for the first time in years, I felt like his daughter again. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of family activities. We had a barbecue, played softball in the back field, and shared stories around a bonfire. Timothy gradually warmed up to me, showing me his laptop and explaining his latest programming project with enthusiasm. Harold was uncharacteristically attentive, asking about my job and life in Chicago, with what seemed like genuine interest. By Sunday afternoon, as I packed my car to head back to the city, I felt a tentative optimism. Maybe this reunion was the beginning of healing our fractured family. Maybe enough time had passed that we could build something new. "Drive safe," Harold said, helping me with my bags. "And think about what we talked about. Okay, Timothy, really needs this." I nodded, giving him a tight hug. "I will call you next week, I promised." As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. My father and brother stood side by side waving. I could not shake the feeling that something was not quite right, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the positive aspects of our reunion. Little did I know that this brief moment of family harmony was about to shatter in the most devastating way possible. 3 days after returning to Chicago, I was still riding the emotional high of reconnecting with my family. The reunion had gone better than I could have hoped, and I found myself scrolling through the photos I had taken, smiling at images of Timothy laughing by the bonfire, and Harold with his arm around Uncle Frank. I decided to treat myself to some new work clothes to celebrate my recent promotion. The upscale boutique near my apartment had a blazer I had been eyeing for weeks. I tried it on, admiring the perfect fit in the dressing room mirror, then brought it to the register along with a few other items. "That will be $478, the saleswoman said pleasantly. I handed her my credit card, already mentally reorganizing my closet to accommodate the new purchases. She swiped the card and frowned. "I am sorry, it is being declined." "That is strange," I said, feeling a flicker of embarrassment. "Could you try again?" She did, with the same result. "Do you have another card you would like to try?" I fumbled in my wallet for my debit card, a sense of unease growing. "Use this one, please." Again, the transaction was declined. I apologized to the saleswoman, promised to return later, and hurried out of the store, my face burning with confusion and embarrassment. Sitting in my car, I pulled out my phone and logged into my bank account. The screen loaded and I stared in disbelief at the balance, $23.18. Just last week, before the reunion, I had over $25,000 in my checking account and another $30,000 in savings. My hands shaking, I scrolled through the recent transactions. There they were, a series of transfers over the past 3 days, draining nearly every penny I had. The largest was a transfer of $20,000 to an account I did not recognize, followed by several smaller withdrawals. My first thought was identity theft. I immediately called the bank's fraud department, my heart pounding as I waited to be connected to a representative. "Miss Reynolds, I see the transactions you are referring to," the bank representative said after I explained the situation. "However, these do not appear to be fraudulent. The transfers were initiated from your usual IP address using your credentials, and the security questions were answered correctly." "That is impossible," I insisted. "I did not make those transfers." "The recipient account belongs to Harold Reynolds," she continued. "Is this individual known to you?" My blood ran cold. Harold Reynolds, my father. "Miss Reynolds, is this individual known to you?" the representative repeated. "Yes," I said numbly. "He is my father." "In that case, this appears to be a family matter rather than fraud. Would you like to dispute these transactions? That would involve filing a police report." A police report against my own father. The thought made my stomach churn. "I need to make some calls first," I told her. "Thank you for your help." I sat in my car for several minutes trying to process what was happening. My father had somehow accessed my accounts and taken nearly everything I had. The money I had worked so hard for, saved so carefully, all gone. With trembling fingers, I called his number. It rang 4 times before he answered. "Hello, stranger," he said cheerfully, as if nothing was wrong. "Missing us already?" "Dad," I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Did you transfer money from my accounts?" There was a brief pause. "Oh, that," he said, his tone suddenly casual. "Yeah, we needed it. Timothy's tuition was due." "You needed $25,000 for tuition," I exclaimed, my voice rising. "Dad, that was all of my money. How did you even get access to my accounts?" "Come on, Catherine. Do not be so dramatic," he replied dismissively. "I saw your password when you checked your balance on your phone during the reunion. You should really be more careful with that stuff." I could not believe what I was hearing. Not only had he stolen from me, but he was acting as if it was no big deal, as if I was overreacting. "Dad, what you did is illegal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That is theft. You need to transfer the money back immediately." He laughed, actually laughed. "Illegal. Between family. Do not be ridiculous. Look, Timothy needed the tuition money, and you have a good job. You can make it back in no time." "What about my rent? My bills? Dad, you took everything." "You will figure it out," he said. "You always do. You are the resourceful one, remember? Besides, we are family. Family helps each other." That phrase again. Family helps each other. It had been his mantra throughout my life, but it only ever seemed to flow in one direction. I put myself through college. I reminded him, anger building in my chest. I worked 3 jobs, while taking full course loads. I lived on ramen and coffee to make ends meet. Where was the family help then? That was different, he said dismissively. I was going through a rough patch after your mother died. And what about Mom's life insurance policy? I asked a question that had lingered in the back of my mind for years. What happened to that money, Dad? There was a telling silence. I thought so, I said quietly. I want my money back. All of it. By the end of the week. His tone changed, hardened. Or what? You will call the police on your own father? Report the man who raised you? If I have to. He scoffed. Go ahead. No one will believe you anyway. It will be your word against mine, and I will just say you gave it to us, which is what you should have done in the first place. I am serious, Dad. So am I, he snapped. You abandoned this family years ago to play big shot in Chicago. The least you can do is help your brother get an education. Or are you too selfish to even do that? The accusation stung as he knew it would. He had always been skilled at finding my vulnerable spots. I did not abandon anyone, I said, my voice breaking. I was 19 when Mom died. You were the parent, not me. And now I am parenting, he retorted, making sure Timothy gets what he needs. What kind of sister would not want that for her brother? I closed my eyes, recognizing the manipulation for what it was. This conversation is over. Return my money, or I will take legal action. I mean it. You would not dare, he said, but I could hear a flicker of uncertainty in his voice. Watch me, I replied, and ended the call. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, tears streaming down my face. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not just the theft itself, but the casual way. He had dismissed my feelings, my hard work, my very real needs. My phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. How could you threaten Dad? After everything he has done for us, I thought you cared about my education. So my father had already spun the story to make me the villain. Of course he had. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. How would I pay my rent? Could I really file charges against my own father? What would that do to my relationship with Timothy, with the rest of my family? When I arrived at my apartment, I found Lauren waiting outside my door with a bottle of wine and takeout food. I had texted her briefly about the situation. Oh, honey, she said, pulling me into a hug as soon as she saw my face. Come on, let us get inside and figure this out. As we sat at my kitchen counter, I poured out the whole story. The reunion, the seemingly heartfelt reconnection, the shocking betrayal. I cannot believe he did this, Lauren said, her face flushed with anger on my behalf. Actually, scratch that. I can totally believe it. This is classic Harold. What am I going to do? I asked, staring into my wine glass. If I report him, my family will never forgive me. Lauren reached across the counter and took my hand. The real question is, will you forgive yourself if you do not? Her words hung in the air between us. I knew she was right. This was about more than money. It was about standing up for myself, about breaking a cycle of manipulation and abuse that had defined my relationship with my father for as long as I could remember. I know a good attorney, Lauren said gently. Jennifer Taylor. She specializes in cases like this. Cases of fathers stealing from their daughters, I asked with a bitter laugh. Financial abuse, Lauren corrected. It is more common than you think, especially in families. And Catherine, what your father did is not just morally wrong, it is a crime. I nodded slowly, my resolve building. Okay, set up the appointment. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from family members. Aunt Barbara pleading with me to reconsider. Uncle Frank suggesting a family meeting to work things out. Cousins expressing confusion and concern. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the decision I had made. For once in my life, I would not allow my father's manipulation to dictate my actions. I would stand up for myself, whatever the consequences might be. The last text I received that night was from my father. You will regret this. Family should stick together. I typed a response with steady fingers. See you in court. The law office of Jennifer Taylor was located in a sleek downtown building with a view of Lake Michigan. Jennifer herself was a petite woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Tell me everything, she said after the introductions were complete. Do not leave anything out. For the next hour, I recounted the entire story from my childhood and my mother's death to the recent theft. Jennifer took detailed notes occasionally, asking clarifying questions. Do you have documentation of the transfers? She asked. I nodded, sliding a folder across her desk. Bank statements, screenshots of the transactions, everything the bank could provide me. And you are certain you never gave your father permission to access your accounts or transfer these funds? Absolutely not. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying me. Catherine, what your father did constitutes identity theft and fraud. These are serious crimes that carry significant penalties, including potential jail time. My stomach tightened. Jail time. Potentially, yes. Is that something you are prepared for? I hesitated. Despite everything, the thought of my father in jail was difficult to stomach. What are my options? We can pursue this as a criminal matter by filing a police report, which would likely lead to charges being filed. Or we can approach it as a civil case, suing for the return of your funds, plus damages. Which would you recommend? Jennifer considered for a moment. Given the family dynamics, I would suggest starting with a police report and a civil demand letter. The threat of criminal prosecution might be enough to get your money back without having to go through a full trial. And if it is not? Then we proceed with both criminal and civil actions. But Catherine, I need to prepare you. This will likely cause a significant rift in your family. Are you ready for that? I thought about my father's casual dismissal of my feelings, about years of manipulation and guilt trips, about the $25,000 that represented countless hours of hard work. I think that rift already exists, I said quietly. I am just finally acknowledging it. Jennifer nodded. All right then. Let us start with the police report. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork and explanations. The police officer who took my report was professional, but clearly uncomfortable with the family nature of the crime. I could see the question in his eyes. Who reports their own father for theft? We will investigate and be in touch, he said, handing me a copy of the report. In the meantime, you should change all your passwords and security questions. Already done, I assured him. Back at Jennifer's office, we drafted a formal demand letter to my father, outlining the facts of the case and demanding full restitution within 7 days. If he ignores this, we file for a temporary restraining order to freeze any accounts where he might have placed your money, Jennifer explained. We will also petition the court for an expedited hearing date. As I left her office, I felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. I had taken the first steps toward justice, but I knew the road ahead would be difficult. My phone had been buzzing continuously throughout the day. When I finally checked it, I found over 20 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Most were from family members, their tones ranging from concerned to accusatory. Aunt Barbara, Catherine, please call me. We need to talk about this. Your father is devastated. Timothy, I cannot believe you would do this to your own family. Dad was just trying to help me. Uncle, Frank, let us all sit down together and work this out like adults. And then, most surprisingly, a voicemail from my cousin Brittany. Catherine. It is Brittany. Listen, I need to talk to you privately. There is something you should know about Uncle Harold. Call me when you can. I called Brittany first, curious about what she had to share. Catherine, thank God, she answered immediately. Have you really filed charges against Uncle Harold? I have filed a police report. Yes, I confirmed. Why? She sighed heavily. Because you are not the first person he has done this to. Last year he somehow got access to my dad's investment account and withdrew $12,000. Dad did not press charges because, well, family, but it caused a huge fight. Why did no one tell me this before the reunion? I asked, anger bubbling up again. Aunt Barbara convinced everyone to keep it quiet. She said Uncle Harold was getting help for his gambling problem, and that he was making amends. I guess that was a lie. Gambling problem, I repeated, remembering her hint during our porch conversation. How long has this been going on? Years, from what I understand. Since before your mom died. She paused. Catherine, there is something else. Something about your mom's life insurance policy. My heart skipped a beat. What about it? I overheard my parents talking once. They said Uncle Harold used that money to pay off gambling debts. That is why there was nothing left for you and Timothy. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years I had suspected something was not right about that money, but hearing it confirmed made me feel sick. Thank you for telling me, I managed to say. I needed to know. What are you going to do now? Brittany asked. Get my money back, I replied, with newfound determination, and make sure he cannot do this to anyone else. The next week was one of the most difficult of my life. My father refused to acknowledge the demand letter, instead enlisting family members to pressure me into dropping the case. Aunt Barbara called daily, her messages growing increasingly desperate. Catherine, please reconsider. Your father is not well. He needs help, not punishment. Timothy sent a particularly hurtful text. Congrats on destroying what is left of our family. Hope your precious money is worth it. I struggled to focus at work, grateful for an understanding boss who allowed me some flexibility to deal with my family emergency. Lauren was my rock, coming over with food when I was too emotionally exhausted to cook, listening to my doubts and fears, reminding me that I was doing the right thing. Have you thought about joining a support group? She suggested one evening, as we sat on my couch, both of us in sweatpants with cartons of ice cream. There are organizations for victims of financial abuse. The term still felt strange to apply to myself. Financial abuse. But that was exactly what had happened, not just now but throughout my life. I will look into it, I promised. The police investigation progressed quickly. The evidence was clear-cut, and my father had made little effort to cover his tracks. Within 10 days I received a call from the detective assigned to my case. Miss Reynolds, we have enough evidence to proceed with charges against your father. The district attorney will be in touch about next steps. That same day, Jennifer called with news that the court had granted our request for an expedited hearing. We go before the judge next Tuesday, she informed me. Be prepared for your father to fight this. Fight it, he did. He hired an attorney who specialized in defending white-collar crimes. A slick man, in an expensive suit, who immediately filed motions to dismiss the case. Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding, not a criminal matter, his attorney argued at the first hearing. Miss Reynolds had verbally agreed to help with her brother's education. She is now vindictively using the legal system to punish her father for a perceived slight. Jennifer countered forcefully. Your Honor, there was no agreement. This was a clear case of unauthorized access and theft. The evidence shows Mr. Reynolds deliberately stole his daughter's password and systematically drained her accounts without her knowledge or consent. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the evidence before her. I find sufficient cause to proceed with both the criminal charges and the civil case. Mr. Reynolds, I am issuing a temporary order, freezing all your financial accounts, pending resolution of this matter. We will reconvene for trial in 2 weeks. As we left the courthouse, I caught sight of my father and brother standing by the elevators. Harold's face was a mask of cold anger, but what struck me most was Timothy's expression. For the first time I saw confusion there, perhaps even doubt. Our eyes met briefly before the elevator doors closed between us. In that moment I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, my brother was beginning to see the truth. The morning of the trial arrived with a sense of grim inevitability. I had barely slept the night before, my mind racing with all the possible outcomes. What if the judge did not believe me? What if my father somehow managed to twist the truth, as he had so many times before? Lauren came with me for moral support, squeezing my hand as we walked up the courthouse steps. "You can do this," she whispered. "Just tell the truth." Inside the courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, with wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in an unflattering glow. Jennifer met us in the hallway, her briefcase bulging with documents. "Are you ready?" she asked, her expression serious. I nodded, though ready was the last thing I felt. My father and his attorney were already seated at their table when we entered. Harold did not look at me, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Timothy sat directly behind him, his face unreadable. To my surprise, the benches behind the plaintiff's table began to fill with family members. Aunt Barbara and Uncle Frank, several cousins, even my maternal grandmother, who rarely left her assisted living facility these days. Their presence was both comforting and nerve-wracking. Would they all side with my father? The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Elaine Monroe entered her black robes, swishing as she took her seat at the bench. "Reynolds versus Reynolds," she announced, reviewing the file before her. "This is both a civil case for recovery of funds and a criminal case for identity theft and fraud. How do the parties plead?" My father's attorney stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The proceedings began with opening statements. Jennifer went first, laying out the facts of the case in clear, unemotional terms. She described how my father had observed my password during the family reunion, then systematically transferred funds from my accounts without my knowledge or consent. "This is not a misunderstanding between family members," she emphasized. "This is a calculated theft by a man who has a documented history of financial manipulation and exploitation." My father's attorney painted a very different picture. "Your Honor, this case is about an ungrateful daughter who has turned her back on family obligations. Harold Reynolds is a devoted father who has struggled to provide for his family, especially since the tragic death of his wife. When his son needed help with tuition, Miss Reynolds initially agreed to assist, but then vindictively changed her mind. This is a family matter that should never have come before this court." I clenched my fists under the table, fighting back tears of anger at the blatant lies. Jennifer squeezed my arm reassuringly. "They have no evidence of any agreement," she whispered. "Do not worry." I was called to testify first. Walking to the witness stand felt like moving through water, each step heavy and slow. After being sworn in, I took a deep breath and faced the courtroom. Jennifer guided me through my testimony, asking about my relationship with my father, the family reunion, and the discovery of the theft. I described my shock at finding my accounts, drained the confrontation with my father, and his casual dismissal of my concerns. "Did you at any point give your father permission to access your accounts or transfer these funds?" Jennifer asked. "No, I did not," I said firmly. "I would never have authorized those transfers. That money represented years of hard work and careful saving." "And did you ever agree to pay for your brother's tuition?" Number. My father asked for a loan of $3,000 during the reunion, which I said I would consider. I never agreed to any amount, and certainly not to $25,000. When it was time for cross-examination, my father's attorney approached with a predatory smile. "Miss Reynolds, you claim to care about your family, yet you moved hundreds of miles away and rarely visit. Is that correct?" "I moved to Chicago for my career," I replied evenly. "I have invited my father and brother to visit several times, but they never accepted." "And is it not true that you have achieved considerable financial success, while your father and brother have struggled?" "I have worked extremely hard for everything I have," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "I put myself through college with scholarships and multiple jobs. No one helped me." "So you admit that you have not been willing to help your family despite your financial ability to do so?" Jennifer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is mischaracterizing the witness's testimony." "Sustained," the judge ruled. "Counsel, please stick to relevant questions." The attorney changed tactics. "Miss Reynolds, did you ever explicitly tell your father he could not use your password if he saw it?" "I never imagined I would need to tell my father not to steal from me," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with the attorney trying to paint me as selfish and family-averse. By the time I stepped down from the witness stand, I was emotionally drained, but felt I had held my ground. My father testified next, spinning a tale of family loyalty and misunderstanding. According to him, I had verbally agreed to help with Timothy's education, and had even given him my password during the reunion. She knew I was going to transfer the money, he claimed. We discussed the amount. She just changed her mind afterward, and decided to punish me by bringing these charges. His performance was convincing, his expression earnest as he looked at the judge. I had seen this face before, the sincere mask he wore when manipulating others. Jennifer's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Reynolds, can you provide any evidence of this alleged agreement? Text messages, emails, witnesses. It was a private conversation, he hedged. Family business. So that is a no, Jennifer pressed. What about your gambling debts? Is it true that you have a history of borrowing or taking money from family members to cover gambling losses? My father's attorney shot to his feet. Objection irrelevant and prejudicial. Your Honor, Jennifer countered, the defendant's gambling addiction and history of financial exploitation go directly to motive and pattern of behavior. I will allow it, the judge ruled. The witness will answer the question. My father shifted uncomfortably. I may have had some issues with gambling in the past, but I have been in recovery. Is it true that you used your late wife's life insurance policy money, that should have gone to your children's education, to pay gambling debts? A murmur ran through the courtroom. My grandmother audibly gasped. That is a lie. My father snapped, his composed facade cracking. Who told you that? Jennifer did not answer his question. Mr. Reynolds, our investigation has uncovered evidence that you accessed and emptied a joint investment account belonging to your brother-in-law Frank Reynolds approximately 14 months ago. Is that correct? Uncle Frank leaned forward in his seat, his expression grim. My father glanced nervously at his attorney. That was a loan. Frank agreed to it. A loan that was never repaid, Jennifer noted. Just like the $12,000 you took from your daughter's college fund after her high school graduation. Or the $4,000 you borrowed from your mother-in-law last Christmas. The judge's eyes narrowed. Mr. Reynolds, have you taken money from other family members without authorization? They are all loans, my father insisted, his voice rising. Family helps family. That is what we do. The real surprise came when Timothy was called to testify. I had assumed he would support our father completely, but as he took the stand, I noticed a new hesitation in his demeanor. Timothy Reynolds, my father's attorney began. Your sister has claimed that your father stole money to pay your tuition. Can you tell the court about your educational situation? Timothy glanced at our father before answering. I am studying computer science at State University. Dad has been helping with tuition when he can. And was your tuition due at the time of these transfers? Timothy shifted uncomfortably. Not exactly. I am actually on a full academic scholarship. I do not have tuition expenses. A shocked silence fell over the courtroom. Even my father's attorney seemed taken aback. Then what was the $25,000 for, the judge asked directly. Timothy looked down at his hands. I do not know. Dad told me it was for my education, but I never saw any of that money. My father's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. Timothy, he hissed loud enough for the front rows to hear. The judge banged her gavel. Mr. Reynolds, you will remain silent or be removed from the courtroom. Jennifer approached Timothy gently. Timothy, has your father ever taken money from you or used your name to obtain funds? He hesitated, then nodded. Last year, he took out a student loan in my name. He said it was for my living expenses, but I never saw that money either. Objection, my father's attorney shouted. This is beyond the scope of these proceedings. Your Honor, Jennifer countered. This goes directly to the pattern of financial abuse and the defendant's credibility. I will allow it, the judge ruled, her expression hardening as she looked at my father. The final witness of the day was the most unexpected. Brittany approached the stand visibly nervous but determined. Miss Lopez, Jennifer began. You are the defendant's niece, correct? Yes, Brittany confirmed. Uncle Harold is my mother's brother. Can you tell the court about any financial interactions you have observed between the defendant and other family members? Brittany took a deep breath. 2 years ago at Christmas, I overheard Uncle Harold asking my father for money. When Dad refused, saying he had already loaned him thousands that were never repaid, Uncle Harold became angry. Later that night I saw him using Dad's laptop. The next day, Dad discovered $12,000 missing from his investment account. Did your father report this theft? No, Brittany said sadly. Aunt Barbara convinced him not to. She said it would destroy the family. Do you have any knowledge about Elizabeth Reynolds' life insurance policy? Brittany nodded. My parents discussed it once when they thought I was not listening. They said Uncle Harold had used that money, which should have gone to Catherine and Timothy, to pay off gambling debts. My father stood up abruptly. This is all lies. They are all turning against me. The judge banged her gavel. Mr. Reynolds, sit down immediately, or you will be held in contempt. He remained standing, his face contorted with rage. I was trying to hold this family together. After Elizabeth died, I was all they had. Bailiff, the judge ordered. Please restrain the defendant. As the bailiff approached, my father pointed at me. You ungrateful brat, I gave you everything. You gave me nothing, I said quietly, the words carrying in the sudden silence. You took. You always took. The bailiff escorted my father from the courtroom as he continued to shout accusations. The judge called a 15-minute recess to restore order. In the hallway, I found myself surrounded by family members. To my surprise, they were not angry with me. Aunt Barbara hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry, Catherine, she whispered. I wanted to believe he was getting better. I should have warned you. Uncle Frank patted my shoulder awkwardly. We all should have done more. Said more. My grandmother took my hands in hers, her eyes fierce, despite her frail appearance. Elizabeth would be proud of you standing up for yourself. That is what she always wanted for you. When court resumed, the judge delivered her ruling without hesitation. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented today, I find in favor of the plaintiff in the civil matter. Harold Reynolds is ordered to repay the full amount of $25,000, plus damages of $10,000 and all legal fees. She turned to the criminal charges. As for the criminal case, there is clear evidence of identity theft, fraud, and financial exploitation. I am recommending that the district attorney proceed with prosecution to the fullest extent of the law. She looked directly at me. Miss Reynolds, the court commends your courage in coming forward. Financial abuse within families is often hidden and denied. By speaking your truth today, you have not only sought justice for yourself, but potentially protected others from similar exploitation. As we left the courthouse, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. I had won, but at what cost? My relationship with my father was irrevocably broken, though perhaps it had been broken all along. Timothy approached me hesitantly as I stood on the courthouse steps with Lauren and Jennifer. Catherine, he said, his voice small, can we talk? I nodded, and we stepped away from the others. I did not know, he said, his eyes fixed on the ground. About the money, about Mom's insurance policy, any of it. Dad always told me you abandoned us, that you did not care. I believed him. I know, I said gently. He is very convincing. Timothy looked up, his eyes filled with tears. What happens now? I did not have a simple answer for him. The road ahead would be complicated and painful, but for the first time in years it would be a road built on truth rather than manipulation and lies. Now, I said, taking his hand, we start over. The weeks following the trial were a strange mixture of victory and loss. The court had validated my experience and ordered restitution, but the emotional fallout was just beginning. My family, once seemingly united, splintered into factions. Some, like Aunt Barbara, Uncle Frank, and surprisingly Timothy, rallied around me. Others, particularly my father's brothers and their families, cut contact entirely. They could not reconcile the Herald they thought they knew with the man exposed in court. The district attorney moved forward with criminal charges. My father, facing the possibility of jail time, accepted a plea deal that included probation, mandatory counseling for gambling addiction, and community service. The judge also issued a restitution order that would garnish any income he earned until my money was fully repaid. I received an official letter from Aunt Barbara, uninviting me from the Thanksgiving gathering at her house. "Catherine, I believe you did the right thing," she wrote, "but some family members are not ready to see you. I hope you understand." I did understand, but that did not make it hurt any less. The holidays, already difficult since my mother's death, loomed as a particularly lonely prospect that year. The anonymous calls began about a month after the trial. Never from the same number, always late at night, sometimes just breathing, sometimes whispered threats or insults. I reported them to the police, who advised me to document everything but admitted there was little they could do unless the caller made specific threats. "Change your number," Lauren suggested during one of our weekend brunches, "and maybe stay with me for a while, just until things calm down." I considered it, but ultimately declined. I cannot keep running and hiding. This is my home, my life. I will not let him drive me away from that too. Instead, I invested in a security system for my apartment and became more cautious about my routines. The calls eventually tapered off, though the anxiety they had planted remained. The most unexpected development came in the form of an email from Timothy, about 6 weeks after the trial. "Catherine," he wrote, "I have been doing a lot of thinking. Dad has been telling me his version of events my entire life, and I never questioned it. I believed him when he said, 'You did not care about us, that you were selfish for moving away.' I see now how he manipulated both of us. I am still processing everything, but I wanted you to know I am sorry for the things I said and the way I treated you. Would it be okay if I came to visit sometime? No pressure, if you are not ready." I read the email multiple times, tears streaming down my face. It was not a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. I replied immediately, inviting him to visit whenever he felt comfortable. Timothy arrived 2 weeks later, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and uncertainty in his eyes. Our initial conversation was awkward, both of us tiptoeing around the elephant in the room until finally, over pizza in my living room, the dam broke. I looked up to him my entire life. Timothy admitted, his voice cracking. Even when he would disappear for days. Even when the electricity got shut off because he had not paid the bills. I made excuses for him because he was all I had. "I know," I said softly. "I did the same thing for a long time. After Mom died, he told me you abandoned us, that you took your share of her insurance money and ran off to Chicago without looking back." I shook my head, the familiar pain of that lie still raw. "There was no insurance money for me, Tim. Dad used it all to pay gambling debts." "I know that now," he said, looking down at his hands. "I found some old papers in the attic when I was packing up my stuff. Records of the policy withdrawal slips, everything. He lied about so much." We talked for hours that night, filling in the gaps in each other's stories, building a bridge over years of misunderstanding and manipulation. By the time Timothy left to return to school 2 days later, something fundamental had shifted between us. We were not just siblings by blood anymore. We were allies in the truth. The financial recovery process was slow and frustrating. Despite the court order collecting the money, proved difficult. My father had hidden assets, moved funds between accounts, and generally done everything possible to avoid paying what he owed. Jennifer was relentless, filing motions for contempt when payments were missed, tracking down accounts, and eventually securing a lien against my father's portion of my grandparents' property. It would take years to recover the full amount, she warned me, but she was committed to seeing it through. In the meantime, I had to rebuild my financial life from scratch. Lauren loaned me enough to cover my rent until my next paycheck, and I scaled back on every non-essential expense. The promotion I had been so proud of became a lifeline rather than a luxury. My boss, understanding the situation after I finally explained it, arranged for an advance on my bonus. "You are too valuable to lose over something like this," she told me. "Just focus on your work and getting through this." The support I received from unexpected quarters was humbling. Colleagues pitched in to create a Catherine's Emergency Fund gift card. My elderly neighbor insisted on bringing me homemade meals twice a week. A local attorney, who had read about my case in the paper, offered pro bono assistance with securing my credit. In an effort to process my feelings, I began attending a support group for victims of financial abuse. The stories I heard there both broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. So many people, mostly women who had been exploited by those they trusted most: parents, spouses, children. "You are one of the lucky ones," the group facilitator told me, after one particularly emotional session. "You fought back. Many never get that chance." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that standing up for myself had not just been about the money. It had been about reclaiming my voice, my boundaries, my very sense of self. 3 months after the trial, I received an unexpected email from Aunt Barbara. It contained a simple apology and an invitation to coffee. When we met at a quiet cafe near my apartment, she seemed to have aged years in just a few months. "I need to tell you something," she said after we had exchanged awkward pleasantries. "I knew more than I let on. About Harold's gambling, about how he treated you after Elizabeth died. I should have said something, done something." "Why did not you?" I asked, not accusingly, but genuinely curious. She sighed, turning her coffee cup in small circles. "Family loyalty, I suppose, and denial. It is easier to pretend everything is fine than to confront the ugly truth that someone you love is capable of such harm." I nodded, understanding all too well the power of that denial. I felt the same way for a long time. "The thing is," Aunt Barbara continued, "Elizabeth knew. About the gambling, I mean. She tried to protect you kids from it, put money aside in separate accounts. When she got sick, she made me promise to look out for you. I failed her, and I failed you. I am so sorry, Catherine." Her revelation was both painful and healing. The knowledge that my mother had tried to protect us, that she had seen the truth about my father, was a gift I had not expected. As the months passed, I slowly rebuilt my life. My credit score recovered. My savings account began to grow again, though more modestly than before. I moved to a smaller apartment to reduce expenses and adopted a rescue cat for company. The holiday season approached, and for the first time I decided to host a gathering of my own. Not a traditional family Thanksgiving, but a celebration of chosen family. Lauren and her boyfriend Timothy, who took the bus from college, a few close colleagues, my neighbors, and even Jennifer, who had become more than just my attorney. As we sat around my small dining table, mismatched dishes holding potluck contributions, I looked at the faces of those who had stood by me through the darkest period of my life. They might not share my blood, but they shared something perhaps more important: respect for my boundaries, belief in my worth, commitment to the truth. My phone pinged with a text from my father, the first direct contact since the trial. "Happy Thanksgiving. Family should be together today." I read it once, then put my phone away without responding. He was right about one thing: family should be together, and mine was right here around this table. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my new blazer. The promotion to senior marketing executive had come with a substantial raise, finally allowing me to rebuild my emergency fund and even start investing again. The woman in the reflection looked different from the one who had discovered her accounts drained after the family reunion. Her eyes were clearer, her stance more confident. The doorbell rang, and I welcomed Timothy, now in his final year of college. His visits had become regular, our relationship growing stronger with each honest conversation. He had brought his girlfriend, this time a soft-spoken engineering student named Andrea. "The place looks great," Timothy commented, noticing the new furniture and artwork. "You are really back on your feet." Getting there, I agreed, leading them to the living room where I had prepared snacks. "How are finals going?" As Timothy launched into a story about his programming project, I felt a surge of gratitude for this reclaimed relationship. We had lost so many years to our father's manipulations, but we were making up for lost time. The healing process had not been linear. There were days when anger still consumed me, when I would wake up from nightmares about financial ruin, when the betrayal felt as fresh as the day I discovered it. My therapist, Dr. Patrice, assured me this was normal. "Trauma does not heal in a straight line," she would remind me during our sessions. "Some days will be better than others. The goal is not to erase the pain, but to learn to carry it differently." I had taken her words to heart, allowing myself to feel the full range of emotions without judgment. The anger, the grief, the fear, even the lingering love for the father I had once believed in. All of it was part of my story. Harold had made minimal efforts at amends. The court-ordered payments arrived irregularly, always the bare minimum required to avoid further legal consequences. He sent birthday cards with token gifts and occasional texts that felt more like maintaining a record of contact than genuine communication. Timothy kept me updated on their interactions, which had become strained and infrequent. "He still will not admit what he did," Timothy told me during one visit. "He talks about it like it was a misunderstanding, or like you overreacted. I cannot listen to it anymore." My father's continued refusal to take full responsibility was painful, but no longer surprising. I had accepted that genuine remorse might never come, and strangely, that acceptance had been liberating. My healing could not depend on his acknowledgement. In an unexpected twist, my experience had led to a new avenue of purpose. I began volunteering with a financial literacy program for young adults, aging out of foster care, teaching them how to protect themselves from exploitation and build financial security. "Many of you will face pressure from family members who did not have your opportunities," I would tell my students. "Remember that helping others is admirable, but not at the expense of your own security. True love does not demand financial sacrifice." I also joined a task force working to strengthen laws against financial exploitation. My case had become something of a reference point in local legal circles, an example of how family members could use emotional manipulation to commit fraud. The process of rebuilding had taught me to define family in a new way. Blood connections, I realized, were just one type of bond, and not necessarily the strongest. True family consisted of those who respected your boundaries, celebrated your successes without envy, and loved you enough to tell you difficult truths. Lauren remained my steadfast friend, the sister I had chosen rather than been born to. When she announced her engagement, she asked me to be her maid of honor, a role I accepted with tears of joy. "You know," she said, "as we shopped for her wedding dress, watching you stand up to your dad changed me too. I realized how important it is to set boundaries even with people you love." My professional life flourished in ways I could not have anticipated. The focus and determination I had developed through adversity translated into leadership skills that caught the attention of senior management. When a position opened for a director of marketing operations, I applied and was selected over candidates with more years of experience. "You have something they do not," my boss explained when she offered me the role: "resilience and perspective. You do not crack under pressure, and you can see the bigger picture." The financial recovery continued gradually. Jennifer, true to her word, pursued every legal avenue to enforce the court's judgment. By the 1-year mark, I had recovered almost half of what was stolen, enough to rebuild my emergency fund and begin thinking about the future again. Timothy's graduation approached a milestone. I was determined to celebrate properly. I arranged for us to have dinner at an upscale restaurant after the ceremony. Just the two of us. "I have something for you," I told him, sliding an envelope across the table after our meals arrived. He opened it to find a check for $5,000. "Catherine, I cannot take this," he protested. "You are still recovering financially." "It is not from me," I explained. "Well, not directly. It is your portion of what we have recovered so far from Dad. That money was supposed to be our inheritance from Mom to help us build our futures. I want you to have your share." Timothy's eyes filled with tears. I do not know what to say. "Say you will use it wisely," I suggested. "Start your emergency fund, maybe. That is what Mom would have wanted." He nodded carefully, folding the check and placing it in his wallet. "I will. And Catherine, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was awful to you." "You are my brother," I said simply. "That never changed." As summer turned to fall, I received an unexpected letter from my grandmother. Her health had been declining, and her handwriting was shaky but determined. "My dear Catherine," she wrote, "I have been thinking about courage lately. It comes in many forms. Your mother had it when she faced her illness. You have it in how you stood up for yourself. I want you to know how proud I am of you. Family is complicated, but truth is simple. You chose truth, and that was the right choice." Her words were a balm to my soul, a confirmation that I had not destroyed my family by seeking justice, as my father had claimed. I had simply refused to participate in the fiction that had allowed harmful patterns to continue for generations. The holidays approached again, and this time the prospect did not fill me with dread. I had plans to spend Thanksgiving with Lauren's family, Christmas with a group of friends, and New Year's with Timothy and Andrea. My calendar was full of genuine connections, rather than obligatory gatherings filled with tension and unspoken resentments. One crisp October evening, as I walked home from the train station, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost did not answer, wary of the anonymous calls that had plagued me after the trial. Something made me accept the call. "Catherine," a female voice asked. "This is Denise, Uncle Frank's wife. I hope it is okay that I called." "Of course," I said, surprised. Denise and I had never been particularly close. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, I mean mostly." She hesitated. "Your father had a minor heart attack yesterday. He is stable, but I thought you should know." The news hit me with unexpected force. Despite everything, some part of me still cared what happened to him. "Thank you for telling me. Is he at County General?" "Yes. Listen, Catherine. I know things have been difficult, but Frank and I both think what you did was brave. It opened a lot of eyes in the family." After we hung up, I stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, processing my feelings. Should I visit him? Send a card? Ignore the news entirely? None of the options felt quite right. In the end, I sent a simple text message. "Heard about your heart attack. Hope you are recovering well." It was neither forgiveness nor continued anger, just a basic human acknowledgement. His reply came hours later. "Thank you. Would like to see you sometime." I did not respond immediately. The prospect of seeing my father again stirred up a complex mix of emotions. Dr. Patrice had been helping me understand that forgiveness did not necessarily mean reconciliation, that I could release my anger without inviting further harm. "Forgiveness is for you, not for him," she had explained. "It is about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. It does not mean you have to have a relationship with someone who has not demonstrated real change." After careful consideration, I replied, "Maybe someday. Not ready yet." It was an honest answer, one that honored both my healing journey and the reality that trust once broken could not be instantly restored. It would require consistent evidence of change on his part, a commitment to truth and accountability that he had not yet demonstrated. As the one-year anniversary of the trial approached, I decided to mark the occasion not with sadness but with celebration. I invited those who had supported me through the ordeal to a small gathering at my apartment. "What are we celebrating exactly?" Lauren asked, as she helped me arrange flowers and set out appetizers. "Survival," I replied. "Resilience. The fact that someone tried to break me and I am still standing." The evening was filled with laughter, good food, and genuine connection. Looking around at the faces of my chosen family, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path to this moment had been painful, but the destination was worth the journey. Later, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle against the night sky. I thought about all I had learned in the past year, lessons paid for dearly, but valuable beyond measure. I had learned that family is defined by actions, not blood, that love without respect is merely manipulation, that standing up for yourself is not selfish but necessary, that vulnerability is not weakness but courage. Most importantly, I had learned that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. The woman who had once accepted manipulation as the price of family connection now knew her own worth, set clear boundaries, and surrounded herself with people who honored them. My phone pinged with a text from Timothy. "Just wanted to say I love you, sis. Thanks for showing me what strength looks like." I smiled, typing back, "Love you too. We are going to be okay." And for the first time in a very long time, I truly believed it. The money stolen could be replaced. The relationships damaged could be rebuilt or released. But the self-respect I had reclaimed was priceless, a foundation upon which I could build a life of authenticity and peace. Have you ever had to stand up to family for your own well-being? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with those we love the most. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Remember, choosing yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to protect your peace, whatever that might look like for you.